Joining me from iPhone in Canada is Gary, and Gary concentrates on the mobility space and especially Apple's mobility space in Canada. How are you doing, Gary?
I'm doing well, Steve. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure, and it was a busy day for you yesterday, my friend.
Yes, we had lots of Apple announcements to talk about. Apple announced their new iPad mini along with a refresh to some of their Mac lineup, which was also pretty impressive.
So let's begin with the highlight, which was Apple's new iPad mini. Are you surprised they called it the mini, first of all?
You know what? It's really hard to predict the names that Apple would go with. I think once sites start talking about the name, it seems like Apple just jumps on it, or maybe they've had it planned all this time.
Yeah.
You never really know, but the iPad mini just really works, I guess.
Yeah, well,
that's what it is.
It fits with their naming convention. And when you think about some companies' naming conventions, which gets unbelievably confusing, I'm speaking to you, Microsoft Explorer. It is, I guess it fits. But so the mini is a 7.9-inch iPad. It fits in one hand. Small form factor, same resolution screen as we have in the current screen. What's your first impression?
First impressions, I found it really interesting how they announced the device. It basically, they had the iPad turn around 180 degrees, and there was the iPad mini, and it was just bam. I think it's hard to say. I think the form factor, the way that they compared it, saying, it has the same resolution as the iPad 2, so all existing apps would work with no major modifications needed. The form factor looks pretty nice, although, we're going to wait to see, but just looking at the build quality and what some of the early impressions that some of the other media people have talked about, it does seem like a really well-built device. The price is what people seem to want to talk about today.
Okay, what are you hearing?
The price is $329
expensive
for the iPad mini in Canada and the US.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are sort of questioning, why they went with such a higher price, but when you think about it, Apple never really does sort of the price war with any of its competitors. So it is a premium product, and for people who want it, they will pay.
Now, who is it going to work for? Is it going to work for the person that now has an iPad and an ebook reader, and they're looking for something a little more compact? Where's the sweet spot for this product?
You know what? I think it's really going to make some major headway into the education and medical fields. I guess, companies or organizations that are already using the iPad, they know that it works. Now there's a smaller form factor that's a bit more portable, and it's also a lot cheaper. So it's almost a no-brainer that we'll see basically the iPad mini explode in schools and hospitals like we've seen with the existing iPad.
Well, it certainly is, lab coat pocket friendly as far as its form factor. Think about those big ass pockets they got. It's going to fit
pretty
just
nice.
fine.
And the decision by Apple to keep the same ratio, I think, is pretty important, because for anyone who has used a widescreen 7-inch tablet, it can be a bit awkward depending on the orientation.
Okay, so it is out. It's shipping in November 2nd, so we're just a week or so away. In the 16, 32, 64 gigabyte configurations, which is pretty much, it mirrors configurations with its big brother. I guess you can call the iPad 3 or now 4. We'll talk about that in a moment. Its big brother, and also available as LTE, which I think is a very compelling concept of having it on the LTE network.
Yeah, I mean, I think Apple has done a really good job with implementing cellular connectivity with its iPads. I mean, you take a look at its competitors, and some of them don't even have the mobile space sort of worked out. It takes a lot of work to work with carriers and such, and I think Apple was able to take advantage of their connections with the iPhone and seamlessly integrate LTE connectivity into the iPad mini. So yeah, I mean, basically for anyone who is familiar with the iPad and what it can offer, the iPad mini is just, it's pretty simple to just jump in there and, set up your data plan and whatever and continue on with it.
What surprised me was they didn't go with and correct me if I'm wrong, but they went with a lower resolution camera than the iPhone 5 has. They went with a 5 megapixel camera. That surprised me. I thought they would give the same quality camera as their best optics that they were offering.
Yeah, usually, the iPhone is, it's hard to say. I guess if you look at it from a usability standpoint, I don't know how many people use their iPads out there to take pictures.
Well, that's it. It's ridiculous.
It does look pretty funny when
Yeah.
when you see someone holding an iPad 3 and they're trying to take a picture. I mean, 5 megapixels is it's
Nothing to
not
sneeze at.
great,
Yeah.
but it's still usable if you actually needed a photo taken.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'm not sure if holding up that smaller one would be a little more less mocking worthy. But and when I do see people with their iPads holding them up, taking pictures, it's wrong. People, don't do that. Don't do that. Now, here was the surprise. This one caught me completely surprised me. Was that wasn't the only iPad that was announced? Is they basically have released another version of their new iPad 4.
That's right. The existing iPad third generation basically went the way of the dodo bird.
After
Apple
2.5 months?
surprised all of us pretty much with
Yeah.
a refresh. Basically, they kept the same form factor, but they're calling it the iPad fourth generation. Here comes the new A6 processor, FaceTime HD, and the Lightning port, just sort of to unify all these new devices. And the price and the configurations have stayed the same. So some people are saying, you know what, Apple, I just bought my new iPad third generation, 6 months ago.
Or less,
And
yeah.
here is a new refresh. But in the big picture, I think this refresh isn't a huge game changer. Your existing iPad 3 will still work just as fine.
And do you think that was about the availability of the A6 in quantities and pricing, or do you think it was about getting Lightning out there a little more, a few more options for the Lightning interface?
Hard to say. I would say Apple might be planning to somehow modify their iPad update cycle and to maybe push it to the fall to target the holiday quarter.
Okay.
But I mean, this update, I think Apple wants to turn the iPad sort of into their Mac lineup, where there is no specific sort of name or upgrade. It's just, you know what? It's the iPad. We're going to update it with better specs, like we've seen with the MacBook Air from this summer and the Mac Mini refresh. It's sort of just the iPad. And if we think that it needs improvement and we can make it better, we're just going to make it better and keep the same price and the same configuration.
It's kind of like cars now. You just kind of refer to your, as far as the computers are going, as far as your MacBook Pro 13, it's a 2011. People are saying that's where I see people describing them now. It's a 2012. It's not. It's the i5, 2.7 gigahertz. We're leaving that around. We're just kind of rounding it down to this is the year it was released, so you have a good idea of its performance capabilities. Now,
and in a way, it kind of makes sense in terms of branding, because are we going to end up having the iPad 7 or the naming schemes just keep on going, and it can be confusing. But if you look at it from a brand standpoint, it's just the iPad, as opposed to where you have some other smartphones where they have some of the most inventive names ever.
Yes.
Some sort of like, I don't know if you've seen the Android name generator website, but it comes up with some of the most hilarious names.
Have you seen the game?
For Android phones? Like,
have you seen the game Android Phone or Condom? Because the names are so similar. There's a game you have to play and you have to choose whether it's a condom company or an Android phone, and it's actually it's pretty confusing a couple times. You're going, really? That's a phone? So
they're pretty creative over there.
Now that wasn't the only thing. Apple took advantage of having everybody together, and they did quite a few other announcements. They completely refreshed the iMac lineup. And I guess the big news to me there is, the thinner screen is nice and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't really matter. I don't understand the sex appeal of a thin screen on a desktop computer, other than I guess it looks a little bit better. But I mean, it's not portable, so what's the difference? But they've included now a style of drive which has only had moderate success in the Windows world. They're calling it the Fusion Drive. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting that Apple is going this route. A lot of people are saying it's a great offering by Apple. We've seen those hybrid drives before available for people who like to upgrade their own computers.
Yeah, and so essentially, we should
this
explain
time
possibly what they are.
It's soft. It's all software based. How it manages your
Yeah,
files.
which is I think going to be really important. So for those of you who don't know what the Fusion drive is, it's the hybrid drive, which is a combination of fixed traditional drive with magnetic media and SSD. So it's got an SSD. I guess it's not really it's attached to the drive, built into the drive, but instead of having a separate solid state drive and a separate magnetic media, they're built into one. And Apple, hopefully, through their software, are going to make the management of it, and ultimately it should make for a much faster user experience.
Yeah, and it's also makes it more affordable for users to upgrade to a larger hard drive
and to have an SSD.
Personally, I would probably stick to, I would probably wait it out and wait for solid state hard drives to reach higher capacities.
Yeah.
But this is definitely a viable option for just, average users who want to have that performance of an SSD.
And they've taken away.
They also need the space of a regular conventional hard drive.
Well, with the new iMac, though, they've taken away one of our options, which was always to remove that optical drive, to remove the CD drive and put a solid-state drive in there. So you'd have a solid-state boot drive, which is the configuration of the computer I'm talking to you on now, a solid-state boot drive and then a big magnetic drive. They've taken that away because now there's no optical drive. Apple's done away with the optical drive in the iMac, and it's been a bit quiet, but I think that's a pretty profound step too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people still use CDs and DVDs nowadays, but Apple is always pushing the envelope, trying to move forward. You take a look at the MacBook Air; there's no optical drive, and it didn't have an optical drive since its launch. So I think with the new iMac, that was probably one of the biggest surprises that people haven't really been talking about. There weren't any images leaked of the new iMac.
Mm-hmm.
There were whispers of a refresh, but no one knew that an all new design was coming. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty good. Looking at the images and some of the early hands-on, people were quite impressed with the build quality of the iMac and how thin it really is. I mean, previously other generations weren't thick by any means, but for Apple to basically make it even smaller is quite an impressive engineering feat.
Total waste of time. I'm sorry. Because I'm looking at my screen right now. I cannot see the side of it. I don't spend a lot of time looking at the side of my screen. Now, call me, I don't know, maybe I'm not artistically aware. I'm not too sure, but I certainly don't see that as being worth a lot more money and cramming it and dealing with all those heat issues to make it that much thinner. It's a bit surprising to me. I'll say that. But then I'm certainly not as successful a product designer as the folks at Apple are. They also refreshed the Mac Mini lineup. That wasn't the only Mini with the iPad. They refreshed the Mac Mini lineup, but that's now, desktop computing is pretty much gone now. I mean, okay, so they made it a little bit faster and a little bit better. Okay, what's next?
I don't know. I mean, people are talking about, Apple moving into the TV space. I mean,
yeah,
we've heard whispers about it before. What's going to happen next year? This year, Apple announced a lot of new products. They had 5 major events this year, which is quite a bit for the company.
Yeah.
They've released a lot of products. What's next? So it's really hard to say.
So we've got a few other. I'm going through your blog posts, and I see you've got a nice steady stream of posts. Apple justifying the price of the Mac Mini. I see that Siri is being put into the iPad Mini, which is good, but still not an iPad 2, eh?
Yeah, and that's a really interesting move. I think adding Siri to the iPad Mini definitely will make it a selling feature for those who want to use the voice assistant.
Mm-hmm.
The iPad 2, I mean, it looks to be kind of undercut by its younger brother, the iPad Mini.
Yeah.
I don't even know if the iPad 2 would have a reason to exist other than for people who don't want the latest iPad with the Retina display. So
well,
really, that sort of Apple decision matrix. Which product should I buy based on what features and price?
I'll throw this out to you for the iPad 2. Education. That is, if they can get the price down, if they can get it down to, $299 type price frame for the iPad 2 for a reasonable configuration, I think it could have some legs in the education market, because education is loving the iPad at this point. So it's a price barrier right now.
It totally is, and that's what I was saying before. Even with the 7.9-inch iPad Mini at the $329 price, I mean, for people who, for like schools that want to buy, in bulk, I mean, Apple might give them a little bit of a discount, and that iPad Mini will still work just as good as the iPad 2. Same battery life, just a bit of a smaller screen. They know that existing apps will work. I know one of the school districts in San Diego, they recently purchased 25,000 iPads for
Wow.
their education system. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's a goodly number. So any final thoughts on the event yesterday? Anything that we missed that I didn't cover?
I would say it was a pretty no-frills event that was only hosted by CEO Tim Cook and Phil Schiller. And just the two of them, they were able to announce a huge lineup of new products for the holidays. They didn't involve any demos, and it was basically no frills, and they just put it out there. And I think it was nicely timed to sort of take away some media attention from Microsoft,
from Windows 8,
Surface, and Windows 8, which launches on Friday, which is the same day as the iPad Mini pre-order. So, because I mean, a lot of Surface reviews were out. I think the embargo was released a couple days ago, and you barely even saw any attention given to the Surface. It was just, when Apple announces an event, it basically takes over all headlines.
It washes all the media, and Microsoft is trying to combat that with traditional media. I think, what is it, they're spending $3 billion. I don't know how much they're spending on launching Windows Surface and Windows 8, and but the media isn't talking about it. Only purchased media. So Apple, once again, point Apple. Well, have you got your order in for the Mini?
It doesn't take place until this Friday. We will be pre-ordering one this time around. I'm gonna get one for my wife.
Okay.
So,
what configuration
get
you
a
get?
Nice white iPad Mini with a pretty pink smart cover.
The smart cover. Now, what configuration are you ordering? What's the sweet spot for you?
Well, mainly the iPad, I see it as sort of a couch device, so probably just the 16 gigabyte model.
Second screen.
I don't see any sense in getting a cellular model unless you actually need to be on the road for business or work or school or whatnot.
And if you have an iPhone 5 or an iPhone 4S or an iPhone 4, you can tether the two very easily.
Exactly.
So you've already got the radio.
I have an iPhone 5 and I have a 6 gig data plan. I can create a hotspot easily and just tether whenever I need internet. So.
The only issue there is battery life. On your poor iPhone, it
exactly. I just need to find another lightning cable and get a charge that phone.
There you go. Gary Ng, he is the editor of iphoneincanada.ca, a terrific resource for all things mobility, especially the Apple mobility world. Thanks for your time today, Gary.
All right. Thanks, Steve.